When mysterious blindness strikes the city, the struggle for survival reveals the true nature of humanity. The film begins in a contemporary metropolis. At the heart of this city, a young taxi driver faces a disturbing event. He suddenly loses his sight while driving. Vivid descriptions capture his panic as he sees only floating shadows against a hazy background. A pedestrian, witnessing the scene, steps in, takes the wheel, and navigates the congested streets to the driver's residence. During the ride, the taxi driver describes the strangeness of his visual condition, not total darkness, but a veil of floating shadows. The passerby, surprised, comments that blindness is usually characterized by complete darkness. Upon reaching the taxi driver's home, in a sudden twist, the seemingly good Samaritan speeds off with the car, leaving the driver disoriented and vulnerable in the middle of the street. Desperate, the man cries out for help. A kind passerby hears his pleas and guides him to his apartment, where his wife, alarmed by the situation, quickly searches for the number of a renowned ophthalmologist. She accompanies him to the doctor's office, where the doctor performs a series of tests but finds no physical abnormalities in the taxi driver's eyes. Intrigued, he suggests hospitalization for more detailed evaluations. Meanwhile, the doctor returns to his routine, seeing various patients, including an excited child, an elderly man with partial vision, and a woman wearing dark glasses. After a long day, he shares the peculiar case of the taxi driver with his wife. They enjoy a night of rest and conversation. In parallel, one of the doctor's patients, the woman with dark glasses, follows his medical advice and heads to a pharmacy. After picking up the prescribed medications, she takes a taxi to a hotel, where she discreetly works as a call girl. During an encounter, she also experiences sudden blindness, leading to her abrupt abandonment by a panicked client. Confused and wearing only a nightgown, she seeks help from the hotel staff. At dawn, while the doctor's wife prepares breakfast, he, suddenly overcome with fear, reveals that he has also lost his vision. Calmed by his wife, he seeks help from colleagues, who one by one begin to report similar cases of mysterious blindness, triggering alarm within the medical community. Without understanding the cause, the mystery deepens. As the strange white blindness spreads at an alarming speed, an ambulance arrives to rescue the doctor, whose vision had vanished suddenly. Trying not to be separated from her husband, his wife pleads to be taken along. Under the pressure of a sudden claim that she too was blind, they are both admitted into the ambulance, heading toward a facility reconfigured for quarantine, now under direct government orders. The couple is assigned to the wide and echoing room number 1 in the facility. In a moment of desperation, the doctor pleads with his wife to reveal that she still has her sight and return to the safety of their home, but she refuses, choosing to stay by his side. Shortly thereafter, other patients begin to arrive, including familiar figures like the taxi driver, the thief, the prostitute, and the child previously treated by the doctor. Recognizing the thief's voice, the taxi driver flares up in anger, and a fight breaks out. The doctor, still adjusting to the darkness that now surrounds him, struggles to calm the situation. As the days go by, the patients try to adapt to the confined and challenging environment. The doctor's wife becomes a central figure in this adaptation, guiding others on how to navigate the space, memorize passageways, and count steps to the bathrooms and other essential areas. Tension rises again when, in an unfortunate accident, the prostitute, walking in heels, ends up injuring the thief. Without adequate medical resources, and with the doctor himself incapacitated by blindness, his wife takes on the responsibility of treating the injury, though fearing the possibility of infection due to the lack of antiseptics. The doctor, powerless, tries to comfort her, emphasizing the inevitability of their situation. In an attempt to get some fresh air, the doctor's wife ventures outside the room, but is quickly warned by the guards that only the infected may move around. Meanwhile, new patients are admitted, including the policeman, the pharmacy assistant, the hotel maid, and surprisingly, the taxi driver's wife. The reunion between the couple is emotional, even though it is hindered by the darkness surrounding them. As the number of infected people increases, life within quarantine becomes increasingly difficult. The space becomes a stage for both solidarity and despair. The doctor, upon hearing the guards, pleads for medicine to ease the patient's suffering, but is threatened with weapons to return to confinement. The scarcity of food and the lack of response from emergency services only intensify the crisis. The next day, the arrival of a new group of patients, including the ophthalmologist's assistant, promises new challenges and perhaps new hopes for those confined in the increasingly crowded quarantine facility. In that chaotic quarantine environment, The doctor's wife becomes a figure of leadership, seeking methods to facilitate the movement and safety of the confined. She comes up with the ingenious idea of stretching ropes between the various sectors, allowing people to guide themselves by touch. The doctor, concerned about sanitary conditions, focuses his attention on the bathrooms, aware of the challenges posed by the lack of vision in such an essential space. The situation becomes unsustainable, and frequently, patients flee to the fresh air, trying to escape the unbearable stench that accumulates. The atmosphere in the place worsens when the taxi driver's wife, overwhelmed by the situation, plunges into a deep depression, distancing herself from her husband and everyone around. The doctor's wife, though alarmed by the soap shortage, is grateful for the continuous availability of water and insists on the importance of personal hygiene for everyone. In this dark scenario, an elderly man with only one eye brings a radio, a link to the outside world. He informs them of the rapid spread of blindness, mentioning the initial helplessness of the doctors, who one by one also lost their sight. The news includes reports of a devastating bus accident and the collision of two planes, events that spread panic and discouraged people from leaving their homes. The one-eyed man offers a break from reality by playing music, a moment of collective sadness, but also of remembrance of happier times, bringing many to tears. As more people are sent to the quarantine facility, the guards, fearful of contracting the disease and unable to maintain order, begin to shoot those who violate the rules, leading to the first deaths. The desperate community requests a shovel to bury the dead, and the doctor's wife volunteers to retrieve it. Despite pretending to be blind, she struggles to keep up the charade, especially when she realizes that the guard is mocking her. She returns with the shovel, surprising the guards with her quick adaptation. The distribution of food becomes a new point of tension when an armed patient from the third ward proclaims himself king and monopolizes the resources. The doctor's wife's situation becomes increasingly tense as she discovers that the thief has noticed she can still see. Fearing for her safety, she strives to conceal her sight, which leads her to frequent tears. In a desperate act, the thief provokes the guards and is shot. The next day, the doctor and some volunteers take on the grim task of burying the dead. In a moment of vulnerability, the man shares with his wife the difficulty of being cared for by her, suggesting that it makes him feel powerless. She, understanding his struggle, asks him to accept the help and discreetly withdraws, using her husband's temporary blindness to maintain her own strength. The following day, the situation worsens when the self-proclaimed king establishes new draconian rules. Now, food comes at a price. He chants these rules with sarcasm, encouraging his followers to join him in a chorus. Soon, a desperate struggle for food begins, but the fear of weapons prevents any attempts at resistance. The cunning king demands valuables in exchange for food, noticing that the doctor's wife retains her sight. The doctor, seeing an opportunity to resist, tries to organize a rebellion, but the others, finding no use for their jewels in this new chaotic world, hand them over. The doctor's wife collects them, and he exchanges them for food. During this transaction, the doctor notices that one of the king's henchmen, blind from birth, takes delight in his power over the resources. He tries to expose this cruelty, but his ward ends up receiving less food than needed, leaving him despondent and refusing to eat. The prostitute, attempting to adapt to the new order, persuades the doctor to accept the situation, arguing that surviving after an act of violence is complex. They share a moment of intimacy, inadvertently witnessed by the doctor's wife. She confides in the prostitute that she can still see and offers her forgiveness for past events. A week passes, and with no more valuables left, the king makes an outrageous demand. The women must be offered in exchange for food. The doctor's wife pleads for mercy with the guards, but they remain unyielding. The conflict among the refugees intensifies. Some men reject the king's demand, while others in desperation agree. The doctor opposes his wife's participation, but his influence is limited. Determined, 9 women, including the doctor's wife and the prostitute, offer themselves in exchange for food. The taxi driver tries to dissuade his wife, but she willingly joins the group. They are taken to the third ward, lined up in a formation that pleases the king and his henchmen, who begin a wild orgy. The doctor's wife, recognized by the king, faces the consequences of old grudges. When they return, the women bring with them a fatal victim of the king's henchmen, a tragic reminder of the atrocities they endured. After cleaning the deceased woman's body and paying their last respects, the situation in the quarantine facility continues to deteriorate. The next night, the insatiable king announces that he expects the women from the second ward. The man born blind, curious about the state of the women who visited earlier, is confronted by the doctor's wife with the news of one's death. Shocked by the revelation, he withdraws in silence. Armed with a pair of scissors, the doctor's wife resolutely heads to the third ward. Finding the king distracted, she confronts and kills him. However, the man born blind, recognizing her by her footsteps, tries to stop her with a gun. The women take advantage of the confusion to escape. Before fleeing, the doctor's wife makes a grim promise. Every day without food, one resident of the third ward will lose their life. She recounts the incident to her husband, who realizes they are on the brink of open war within the facility. He orders the doors to be barricaded, and after intense discussions, the men of his ward decide to take drastic action and seek food on their own. Meanwhile, one of the molested victims, in a desperate act, starts a fire, causing panic and gunfire among the king's henchmen. The doctor's wife guides the people in her wing to the courtyard, seeking an escape. When they discover that the gates are unguarded, they enter a ruined city, marked by abandonment and death. She finds a relatively intact store and directs everyone to take refuge there, locking the doors to protect themselves from other groups desperate for resources. Together, they explore a looted supermarket and discover an entrance to a basement filled with food. As they fill bags with provisions, they are followed by a crowd attracted by the smell of the food. The doctor intervenes, helping his wife escape the chaos and move away from the enraged crowd. Momentarily separated, he returns to retrieve a lost jacket while she waits, witnessing the brutality of dogs tearing apart a person's corpse. Rain begins to fall, and the doctor's wife, shaken, seeks refuge in a nearby church. There she finds her husband, and together they return to the group, who cleanse themselves in the rain. The reunion is emotional, with everyone celebrating the couple's safe return. After a brief rest in the store, the doctor's wife proposes that the group move to her house, describing it as spacious and comfortable, ideal for accommodating everyone. The group, relieved to have someone who can see to lead them, follows, grateful for this direction. During the walk, the doctor's wife describes the surroundings, while the others share details about their own appearances, allowing each one to form a mental image of the others. Arriving at the house, they find the door locked, a sign that there might be someone inside. Carefully, they enter the place. The doctor's wife suggests that everyone change clothes, providing clean garments for the group. As they dress, the atmosphere lightens with jokes about their new appearances. For the first time since the crisis began, she helps each person wash carefully, fostering a moment of renewal. During this process, the old man with one eye confesses that he feels part of a family for the first time, expressing his desire to live with them, care for them, and help everyone. At an emotional dinner, everyone toasts to the human family they have formed together. The next morning, organized and practical, the doctor's wife proposes a meeting to establish common rules, especially since food is scarce. Then, suddenly, the taxi driver, the first infected, announces that his vision was restored as unexpectedly as it had disappeared. The news spreads a wave of joy and hope among everyone, who embrace each other, moved by the possibility that the blindness might be temporary. This ignites a new light of hope, suggesting that soon everyone may see again, and that this experience might teach everyone to value life more. The doctor's wife, feeling the weight of responsibility lifted from her shoulders, realizes that she is finally free. The film concludes by reflecting on how people of different ages, nationalities, genders, and professions were united by adversity, each reacting in their own unique way. The message remains that maintaining humanity is crucial in times of crisis, as it is what can guide everyone back to the light, even in the deepest darkness.